Listen, folks, real estate values are going up in 2021. I don't know what else to say. It's just inevitable that that is what is going to happen. So there you have it. Video over. Hello, this is Corey. Obviously kidding, but honestly, if that's all you came here for, then you're free to go. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Corey MacArthur. I'm a top producing realtor here in London, Ontario, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why I think real estate values are going to go up in 2021 here in London, Ontario, but also across Canada in general. I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I think real estate values are going to go up, and it is going to start with something that we have talked about a lot, and that is supply and demand. And the reality is that the supply just isn't enough to meet the demand. And if we look back over the numbers, we actually see that on average, we were selling about 830 houses a month here in the London and St. Thomas board. And if we take some time and look at what the average number of listings, I believe it's around 1,100 listings. And one of the ways that we measure the health of a market is we look at the months of inventory that we have. And typically what we will say is, if it's a seller's market, it means that there's less than 5 months of inventory. And if it's a buyer's market, it means there's more than 7 months worth of inventory. And if it's somewhere in between, we call that a balanced market, where there's equal opportunity for both the buyer and the seller. Definitely in the last couple years, it's been a strong seller's market. And when we start to look at those numbers, we actually see that we only had about 1.3 months worth of inventory on the market if we use that average number of listings. So what would need to happen to our supply in order for prices to stabilize or potentially even decrease? Well, to hit that 5-month mark of 5 months worth of inventory, we would need to see our supply literally quadruple on average if sales were to remain the way that they were. So that would just bring us to about 5 months worth of inventory, and even there it just means that prices are probably going to stabilize to hit that 7-month mark and potentially see prices start to decrease a little bit. We have a long way to go. Again, I said that average number was actually around 1,100 homes per month that were active on the market, while actually at the end of December that number was 430. So though we're starting off the year very low heading into 2021, and as long as supply continues to stay that low versus our demand, the number of sales that we're seeing on average, then we are going to continue to see prices climbing, because we're going to see buyers competing for the same property over and over again. The second point that I am going to make, and it's a pretty obvious one, is that we are seeing historically low interest rates. And part of this comes down from the government or the Bank of Canada and its overnight lending rate, which is passed along to the banks. And now we're actually, at certain points, we can find interest rates below 2% on a 5-year fixed rate mortgage, which is just kind of crazy. The cost of borrowing is so low to borrow money. It's not free, but it's getting pretty darn close. So when we have a market where demand is already high and then you couple cheap money on top of it, it just adds to the frenzy a little bit. And it is one of the measures that the government is using by supporting the bank with low interest rates to make sure that Canadians continue to borrow and continue to put money into the economy to try and support our economy. So that is why we continue to see more and more Canadians taking on more and more debt. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but one of the things they're doing is they're taking on mortgages and buying houses because the interest is so low. So the last point, or the third point that I'm going to touch on, and it's a point that I saved to the end because it's one that will probably take a little bit more time to explain, but it's also the point that I fully understand the least, and that is monetary policy. The monetary policy coming down from the Bank of Canada. Even though I took a macroeconomics course in university, This is something that I feel like I hadn't had my head fully wrapped around. And if you were like me when the pandemic hit and you saw the government begin to dole out mass amounts of money, I started to question, where's this money coming from and how are we ever going to pay it back? And one of the folks that I found online that has done such an exceptional job of explaining that and educating me is actually a fellow realtor out in Vancouver, British Columbia. His name is Steve Soretsky. I'm going to leave a link to his YouTube channel down below. I wish that so many Canadians would watch his channel because he does such a wonderful job of helping Canadians understand what the government is doing with your tax dollars or the money that they are borrowing that our children are going to have to pay for, and how that affects the real economy. So I encourage you to go check out that channel, but today I'm going to talk only briefly about this and how it's going to impact real estate values. And the reality is that the government of Canada at the beginning of the pandemic made decisions to pump a bunch of money into the economy and essentially also increase the money supply, so the amount of money in circulation in our economy, to try and keep the economy afloat. But their whole concern was, obviously, as we saw our GDP contracting and people losing jobs, is they didn't want our economy to really suffer and potentially get to a spot where it took so long to recover from a huge recession or potentially heading into a deflationary market. So what they did is they put all this money out into the economy, whether it was through CERB or CEWS or loans that were partially forgivable out to businesses as well. Those were all measures that they took, but it came at an incredibly high cost because they're borrowing massive amounts of money. And one of the things that happened is the Bank of Canada came in on the back end and bought government secured bonds. They're basically buying the debt off the government. So it's kind of like the left hand giving to the right hand, which I know sounds funny and takes a bit to wrap your mind around, but at the end of the day, they have put a ton of money into the economy. And what happens when we increase the supply of money, each dollar slowly becomes worth less and less money because there's more of it out there. And so we have a lot of folks out there that are looking at their dollars that are potentially sitting in saving accounts or sitting in bonds or GICs that are now returning less and less and less and less. And they're looking at other asset classes that they can invest in that are more secure and are going to appreciate more. And one of those asset classes is real estate. So it only adds to the already high demand out there, and when we couple that all with the low supply and low borrowing rates that we are seeing, it's kind of creating a perfect storm in the real estate market to see values continue to rise. I think that obviously we are going to continue to see real estate values not only in London but on the whole across Canada. Maybe not every city, I know there's exceptions, but for the most part, on average, values are going to continue to grow. We're predicting here in London that we could see anywhere from 8 to 12 or 15% increase in prices again here in 2021. Last year, those values came in around 18 to 20%. There you have it, folks. That is what I'm expecting for the 2021 real estate market. If you found that helpful, I'd invite you to hit that like button. I would also invite you to leave a comment down below, especially if you disagree with me. I shot a video like this a couple months ago, and I certainly had a fair share of people leave comments that said it was a very self-serving video on my part. And the reality is I want prices to stabilize just like everybody else does. I'm out there trying to buy real estate as well. That's it for me, and until next time, take care.